Hello, my name is Dae-Han Song, and I'm a part of the International Strategy Center and also a part of the No Cold War Collective. Today, I have the great pleasure of talking with Cathi Choi, the Executive Director of Women Cross DMC. Welcome, Cathi.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, so we'll get started. In May 24, 2015, 30 women from across the world, among them Nobel Peace laureates, peace activists, human rights lawyers, a retired army colonel, and faith leaders, visited North Korea and then made this historic crossing across the DMZ, the Demilitarized Zone, to South Korea. Can you speak about the significance of women crossing the DMZ?
Sure. Well, thanks again, Dehan, for having me and to this podcast for all of the important work that's being done around challenging the Cold War framework. The crossing was important for many reasons. I think one, um, to mark a new chapter of international feminist solidarity with all of Korean women, but also all Koreans who are trying to build a sustainable peace in Korea, and also to challenge Cold War, Forever War frameworks. And I think, what something that the film Crossings showed by Deanne Borshelim about the 2015 crossing was that it was part of a legacy of international women who have come to Korea to bear witness to the effects of war and militarism. As the film showed, that there was a coalition of international women during the Korean War itself, during the years of active fighting between 1950 and 1953, that bore witness and reported back to the world of the horrors that they were witnessing, of the millions of civilians being killed. Of course, many decades later, that's not the situation that the Korean Peninsula is in. We have divided peninsula, and so the discussion of war and militarism in some ways has presented new and unique challenges of how do we talk about effects of forever war when it's not the same type of active fighting. And I do think that's why in 2015 it was important to draw attention to what forever war means, because I think so many people don't realize, I mean, especially in the US, that the Korean War did not end, that it has been multiple decades of war and militarism, that families are divided, that we have millions of landmines still buried at the DMZ. Movement is restricted. We have ongoing war drills. And so what the 30 women in 2015 were drawing attention to is, number one, the war is not over, and number two, why women specifically are deeply impacted by ongoing war and militarism, and why women actually need to be at the forefront of calling for and building a peace process. So since that 2015 crossing, I mean, it's been amazing to witness the multiple levels of impact. So one, there has since that 2015 crossing, every year the women in the region that borders the DMZ, Gyeonggi-do, the women there have organized a peace walk every year on May 24th. So that has been a beautiful, tangible impact of that legacy. And on another level, in the US, in 2019, we started a Korea Peace Now campaign and a national grassroots network. And so every year, we've advocated in US Congress for the first ever congressional bill to have the US sign a peace agreement and be part of the peace building process. And then I'll just note, on a personal level, the crossing changed my life, because when I watched the film, I decided I would start practicing. I would stop practicing law full time. I was at that point working as a lawyer as a civil rights firm here in LA, and I would dedicate my whole life to movement work and for peace building. So on many levels, the crossing birthed a movement, birthed advocacy. We're actually having our 10th annual advocacy week next week, where we organize nationally for congressional offices to meet with constituents.
So yeah, Basically you just celebrated the 10 years and since the crossing, and you did so by coming here to South Korea with the delegation, a peace delegation, and you marched around Camp Humphreys, the largest overseas U.S. base, complete with the golf course. And could you just share a bit about this recent trip? I know that you visited different organizations and also the march, like about the delegates. Yeah.
Yeah, so we wanted to celebrate the 10 years in some way that was feminist and that was bold, but also responsive to the very different political times and landscape we find ourselves in 10 years later. I mean, from 2015 through 2025, we saw multiple summits or moments where we could have had a breakthrough in inter-Korean relations, between U.S.-Korea relations, but because of reasons I'm sure we'll get into later, all of these attempts at peacemaking and diplomacy largely failed. And North Korea, at the beginning of this year, announced that reunification was no longer its policy, and actually blew up the bridge with the beautiful reunification bridge with the two women that actually was the iconic site of the 2015 crossing in the DPRK, where women marched with the 30 women marched with thousands of North Korean women calling for peace. So I say that not to say all hope is lost, but we're in a very different context. So what we wanted to do with this 10-year delegation was really focus on breaking down silos within the U.S. peace movement. Another thing that's changed is, October 7th, and that we are in a different world, global conversation around U.S. militarism, Palestine, and Israel. And so we have seen within the U.S. Rapid fire movements around bringing coalitions together for challenging U.S. militarism, challenging U.S. military aid to Israel. U.S. has given over 400 billion, or I can't remember the exact figure, but Israel is the largest recipient of U.S. military aid since the 1940s. And so there's a whole new conversation happening around what the U.S. is doing in the world, what the military is doing. And something that we offer to that is that the Korean War was the inaugural event of the modern day U.S. military industrial complex, where the U.S. quadrupled spending in just 3 years, from 1950 to 1953. And so to pull at the thread of ending the Korean War is to also pull at the thread of dismantling the whole U.S. military industrial complex. So we brought with us U.S.-based peace activists and anti-war activists, many of them for their first time ever to Korea, let alone East Asia, for them to see what the decades of U.S. troop presence. We have about 30,000 troops in South Korea. And as you mentioned, the largest overseas U.S. military base, multiple times the size of Central Park, in a country that is about the size of Maine. And we wanted these leaders of the U.S. peace movements from different groups. We have African Americans, South Asian, indigenous from Dene Nation, or sometimes called Navajo Nation. And if you go to Women Cross DMZ's page, you'll see how each of these delegates spoke from their perspective of being impacted by U.S. forever wars and militarism, and why that brought them to Korea to be in solidarity with the movement to end the Korean War. And yeah, as you mentioned, we went to Pyeongtaek. We met with Pyeongtaek Peace Center folks that described the incredible police violence that they faced in 2006 during the displacement of Daecheori farmers, so that Pyeongtaek, the Camp Humphreys, could be expanded. We met with folks at Dongducheon, who are protecting the monkey house site from being demolished, and to continue telling the stories of U.S. ROK organized violence against women to control and detain for the purpose of sexually servicing U.S. military men. We went to Jeju April 3rd. Peace Park, again, U.S. accountability has not been achieved, and in that massacre. And we also visited Gangjong, where the naval base there is destroying their oceans and way of life, and also propping up U.S. military presence in its counter against China. So it was an incredibly Powerful trip. You know, we were saying that it was like multiple decades of trauma packed into just 1 week. And so we're still processing, unraveling, and telling the stories of all that we bore witness to. But it was clear that every person from all these different diasporas dealing with all of their own individual conflicts connected to the Korean struggle against forever war because US militarism has impacted so many populations globally.
Great, great. Thank you. And of course, at the end of the day, I think like the most consistent voice for peace in the Korean Peninsula has been from the peace movement, right? Like administrations go up and down, but like there's always been a peace movement calling for peace in the Korean Peninsula for a peace treaty, and in the United States and in South Korea. So yeah, I thank you for your work, and yeah, I wanted to give you a chance. Any last remarks that you might have for our listeners?
Sure. Well, like any organizer, there's always a call to action. So first, I would just thank you, Dehan. Thank you to this platform for the important work you all are doing, challenging Cold War thinking, challenging an idea of an inevitable global conflict, or this outdated idea of clash of civilizations. I'll just close with sharing that wherever you are in the world, there's something that you can do to challenge the forever Korean War. As we know, the US-led UN command involved over a dozen countries. And so there's calls to action within your own country, within your residence. For those in the US, we have a advocacy week every year, and then please just continue to follow Women Cross DMZ and Korea Peace Now for updates on how you can push your own representative, push the different power brokers within the U.S. government to end this forever war. And as always, just continue, please, to support our work, our educating, our organizing, and our advocacy that we've done for 10 years and will continue to do.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.